I wound up, well, I wound up then in Fort McClellan in Alabama as a second lieutenant, where they were training men for the Army.
When the war began, where did you get sent overseas?
Well, at that time, we had, of course, been bombed. The war was going on. Where I was assigned, I didn't like because it was training new men coming in to the Army because we were in arms against the Japanese. And we, well, when we finished, like I say, I went to Fort in Alabama, and then I got orders there to go to a unit that was getting ready to go overseas, and that was that was at I can't at Fort. I got to come up with it, and I can't think of it. I was transferred to Fort. Damn it, I can't remember. Fort DeRussy, Fort DeRussy in Mississippi. A unit there getting ready to go over to Europe, or to go into the war in the European, North African areas. That's all we were told, and we got to what I can't remember the damn name of the fort we were in, but it turned out that in February I was assigned there as a young lieutenant in what was called in the infantry. It was called I'm sorry. The unit was getting ready to go overseas, and this was February, March, April. We would be leaving in April, fully armed and ready to go to actually go in North Africa, and I don't know if there was anybody in Spain or not. So that was how I got into what became a well-known organization fighting the Japanese-American soldiers and they were getting ready to leave for Europe by the end of April. So I got there in time to get acquainted. Be assigned. I was a second lieutenant, of course, still, and we were what was called the cannon company for the. It's an immediate gun that shoots 105 millimeter shell, which gives it a pretty good range. It would it would give the ground troops closer help than your regular artillery, and the government or the military had just changed the type of weapon that we would be using, which were new to the older set of the older grouping of the cannon. So we learned about that, and then we got on to the business to go to Europe during May. We would do it in Europe by the end of May. The convoy was very large, one of the largest convoys so far that have been taken into combat. So we were joining as another battalion to a unit which was composed, all the personnel, all the enlisted personnel were Japanese-American soldiers. And the sum and substance of it was we would be like a fourth regiment on a regular infantry division, which had 3 battalions of men through all the business of observing the enemy with our platoon leader had the radio and so on, and was the person who called in the guns to fire where we observed it. So that was my job as a young lieutenant. I was a platoon leader and 3 105 cannons, so to speak. And they were different than the regular artillery, which had a different type of shell. Well, it was about the same size shell, but it was treated differently. It had a farther ability to shoot umpteen thousands of yards wherever the enemy was. If we could see him, knew that he was there. So that was mainly our job. When I was a platoon leader, I was on the front line, so you had to observe the enemy before you could pull the trigger on the cannon. So that was our job. we, we gave uh, the, the higher colonels who were the company commanders and the battalion commanders and all the personnel that keeps them going and moving and fighting. So we were, as a lieutenant, I was on the front line with the men, trying to observe the enemy or the movement of the enemy and so on. But like I said, our guns were different. They were probably effective range up to around 8,000 yards, whereas the artillery would be further back than we were with their guns, and their guns could shoot up to 15, 17, 18,000 yards. So they could shoot a lot further than our guns could, but we were closer to the enemy. And that's how we did the war in Europe with the 442nd. That was about a quick rundown on what we did, supposed to be doing. So in the end, it worked out quite well. We did lose some men. Guns, of course, were behind the line of scrimmage. So that was about the extent of it. We went into Italy and worked into Italy till we got pulled out, sent to France because they were having more problems with the Germans, what have you. So we moved from Italy into northern France, where we looked onto the Germans and whoever they had fighting. And the same thing applied, except it was perhaps a little more intense than it had been in Italy. At any rate, we did very well when we finally attacked. We joined the infantry 3rd Division as a 4th platoon, so to speak. We did our job, observing and covering people were trapped. We didn't even know some of the French people were in Louviers. We stayed in town in the basement of the buildings. We were bombing them. And we heard some of them too, but we didn't know they were there in the basement of the downtown business area. The Germans knew they were there, but we didn't. Finally, we learned that gun was run to one of the units of the division that we were with, got cut into the German lines, got into the business so far that they were several miles in back of their own lines. I mean, in front of their own lines. And we had to be careful because these people uh, were surrounded by the Germans. They had gone in to a very steeply hilled area and trees and no roads to speak of. So they, like I say, they got in too deep and the Germans cut them off. And so they were trapped. And it was a battalion, like I said, one of the divisions that we were attached to. But so we kept trying to get the town into our hands, and we did, partly, but not wholly. Eventually, it was how to describe it. The American troops were cut off from their home and were trapped, were at the mercy of the Germans. So eventually, we made with some help, we began to worry the Germans about this community, and we finally got the Germans out of there, but we still had our own people under German control further back. In fact, not far from the Rhine River. So during this period of time, it was in December, snow. He even had a little rain. Actually, froze as soon as he hit the ground, but most of it was in the air. It was cold. They had casualties, frozen feet, and if they'd been wounded, their arms may have been trapped, so to speak. My own feet gave out. We moved. We were moving towards helping the Americans that were surrounded by the Germans. So I wound up after a couple of days of movement past this town that had been under German control. And we kicked the Germans out of that, but our lost battalion was still up in the woods, further east, not too many miles from the Rhine River. But I wound up in the hospital back in our lines, and I was there for at least a week, 8 or 9 days. And got my feet back pretty much to normal. I got some better socks and so forth, and new combat boots and whatever, because my feet had been frozen. So by the time I got back, like I say, it was a week or 8 or 9 days. We had completed business, and we had freed the battalion, the friendly battalion. We had been able to kick the Germans out of the area, took a lot of prisoners and that type of thing. And so we were so weak after all this. The one infantry battalion of ours, 3rd Battalion, only had 8 men no officers, 8 men, including the cooks. Um, That's all that was left of the rifle company. And another one also was completely not only wounded but frozen out as well. They were down to 10 or 15 men. And I mean that's the whole company plus the officers that were all either back in the hospital or have been killed or wounded. So they pulled us back, and they eventually sent us back to southern France, and they sent us back to Italy. Well, I'm confusing something here. The southern France was in friendly hands, and yeah, we were in southern France, where they sent us to recruit because we were no longer we ran out of men, and so on. And so new men were shipped in. They came into southern France and joined us there, and we were on the Maginot Line, which ran from the Mediterranean northward, with Italy on the east side and France on the west side, moving all the way up to the Swiss border. And we covered that area in there with mixed up groups and so on, and it was mountainous. We were not allowed into certain areas on the French coast and so on, except for the line that was on the border. At any rate, the Maginot Line ran from the Mediterranean through the edge of Italy, and then through the border between France and what would be northern Italy, was now, of course, occupied by the Germans. So the line, which was all cemented in on the border between the two countries, they became covered by our people, and all the way north to Switzerland. And the activities there were very small. The Germans didn't try to break through. They had men down there, patrols and so forth, and we'd send a few shells into them with our gun, 105, because it was mountains. And, our guns had to be up where they could clear and not shoot into our own people. And so we have one or two guns up near the line, the cement border line between Italy and France. And so it was there then, but after we got back to strength, got our people back and new people coming in, And then the next thing we knew, we were back in Italy. The people in Italy couldn't get the Germans out of the northern mountains. Near mines, miles, uh, whatever the town was.
Milan?
Milan, I can't think of it. Yeah, Milan. Uh, the, uh, the American troops couldn't seem to get through these higher mountains, and the Germans were up on top, looking right down their throats. The leaning tower of Italy was on the southern end of that, on the river bottom down there, next to the Mediterranean, and that was as far as our troops could get or seemed to get, was into that area. They couldn't get around or over the mountains to get into northern Italy. So they sent us back down there, just our regiment. We figured out a way to get the Germans out of the way, because that's one of the hang-ups where the Germans still occupied all of northern Italy, right up to the Swiss border. And so when we went back to Italy, why we figured out that we could maybe a group of men, and it turned out to be a full rifle company. They got rid of all the extras that they could carry. The only thing they had was their weapons and the ammunition, just in case they ran into trouble. They had more ammunition on themselves than they normally would carry, because this was going to be a nighttime infiltration into the mountainous area before you get into northern Italy itself. And so they stripped down, they just carried their guns and their weapons, and that was it. No extra things and what have you. And no other personnel, just the one rifle company. Through the night, they crept around, got behind the Germans in the mountains, and came up behind them in the dark. And soon as it broke dawn, why they attacked the Germans, who most of them had been in bed, except for those on watch or in the counter weapons area, and caught them completely completely surprised the Germans. They didn't know what to do. They threw up their hands. They gave up their weapons. They were all become prisoners of war, and that opened up then the coastal area, which was also under German control because it was protected from the high mountains right next to it. And so the Germans retreated back into the northern Italy, the river and the city and so forth, into the major city of northern Italy. We we handled that pretty quickly, and it was another 10, 15 days that the Germans finally surrendered in northern Italy. That was the goal, and we did it. We accomplished it, and so that's the way it was. So then, of course, more people, friendly people, came in, and so on, and the national line between Italy and France wasn't actually open, so to speak, but you can cross down at the waters on the Mediterranean, the highway. And so it worked out. It smothered the Germans, everything south of Switzerland and eastern communities on the eastern side of Italy. What have you. So that pretty much ended the war. It was, I want to say, 16 days later, I think was when the war was signed off in the Pacific, somewhere in the Pacific, carrying board on the ship, which is still in harbor Hanoi. Well, that ended the things in that country. Of course, we had a lot of time built up. We've been there almost a year, and they were shipping the troops and things out of Europe because at that moment they were still fighting in the Pacific area. Not too much, but it was still antagonism going on. So I volunteered to keep going, and got on the boat, and got off in Boston, and I had 30 days leave. Then I'd report to, what was it? I had to go to, after 30 days, I had to go to California for shipment into the Pacific, because that was still going on. And I was dumb me, they figured it out. So after I get home, a couple days later, my dad's older brother called and he knew I was back. He wanted Dad and I to come up. He lived in southwestern Minnesota. He wanted us to come up and go pheasant hunting in South Dakota. He had a cabin over there. My uncle was a bachelor. He never married. We don't know how many women he ever ran around with, but there were a few that we knew about, we knew of. Didn't make any bones about who they were, but they weren't married. But my mother was always a little chilly about that. So Dad and I, we go up to Tracy, Minnesota, and got with Charles, and he had a couple of other men, and we were going pheasant hunting in South Dakota, where Charlie had a house. It's a small place, had a couple of bedrooms and a toilet, and that was about it. And they used that for hunting, and particularly the birds. So we we shot away. My dad couldn't walk that well, but he would take one of the cars and with two other men, and they would drive down to the end of the cornfield or whatever it was. It was almost a mile long, and we would start up on this, and every other roll or so, uh, the bird would take off, would boom. Some would get away, others would just keep crawling. But then Dad and the two men were on the other end. They would catch them coming out. They'd bang, 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 and kill them off. We had our uh, complete share within a day and a half. In the meantime, my mother called, and my mother was telling Dad, she said, "Is Gerald handy?" And he said, "Yeah, he's right here." And so I said, "Hi, Mom." And she said, "I got news for you." She said, "Your orders to California have been canceled." And she said, "You will have further orders uh, later on." So, like I say, we finished shooting the birds, and we had our full the amount we could have. We had all of it, and so Dad and I drove back home. In the meantime, orders came to North Little Rock, Arkansas. And there's a military post there. I can't think of the name or anything. When my 30 days leave was up, I would report to that particular post for further orders down there. So that ended all of that business, and so I horsed around, and did a few odd things, what have you. Went down to North Arkansas and started training troops. Now we're getting those who worked in the mines and so forth. They were still underage or under the business. If you were more than, well, it's a 28, 38, 28, I don't know. I didn't have to go. But I didn't like it. That was, again, I'm working with people who don't even want to be there. I got sick and tired. My friend that I'd gone to school with was in the officers section in Arkansas, and he got hold of me. He knew I was there, and he got hold of me, and so we used to get together and have a drink or two, and so on. He said, "We've got a request for junior grade officer." Well, I was a big first lieutenant by this time, of course. He said they want, I forget the number, 10 or 15 lieutenants to go to all the support in what the devil was it? It was in Oh, it was in Virginia. No, not Virginia. Anyway, it was not far from New Jersey. Uh, prior to whatever it was, uh, that we would go 2 weeks and be trained and would uh, help a business of finding missing people from D-Day, and bodies, that type of thing. We would be working with French civilians and other type of people and so on. But going to give us 2 weeks what to look for and how to go about it, identifying what have you. And so I said, yeah, put me on. I said, you go back, spend 2 weeks here, and go into the school, and then you have 10 days travel to get to, what's the fort on Long Island. At any rate, there's a hospital there and a fort. Got a name, but I can't think of it. So I went to the school. 10 of us, I think. 10 of us. I said 20. There were 10 of us in that school. And terminology and what you're looking for and how to go about getting it back, that type of thing. And then when we finished that, then we had 10 days to go from eastern New Jersey, West Virginia, I don't know, wherever we were. Then we had 10 days to go from there to Long Island. The devil was that French name. I can't think of it. But they, like I say, it had a hospital and I think training up to a point, and I think they did some special type of training in there. But at any rate, we finished our 2 weeks training, and I made a quick run to Stockton, trains and so forth. Then I came back. Oh, I might mention this. I shouldn't, but I met the train from New Jersey to in Ohio, southern Ohio. I had to change train and go north to the edge of yeah. Oh, God, and we're whatever it was. Anyway, and I get off for a up at this town in Ohio. The New York train to Chicago. I would pick that up and go to Chicago, and then take the bus home to see the parents, and then go back to New Jersey. Back, back to we had to go back to Long Island for a trip to go back to Europe. And the train somewhere in West Virginia or very southern Pennsylvania, our train was okay, but the train that was supposed to be parked on the side, overparked or something, and the boxcar got out onto the main track and got off the track somehow, part of it, and it was about half tipped over. And our train, the engine got up, and that was as far as it could go. I'm sitting on the back end of the train. Coach, that was the bar, and if you wanted a sandwich or something, you could get it, and you'd eat back there. And so this cute little gal was sitting with this older man with a beard at the last seating, and I was at it was an open, double seat table, in between. But I was sitting on a smaller table, looking up, and I kept looking at her because she kept looking at me. And so then the conductor came by and he said, "You can," "you can get off the train if you like," and wanted to walk up towards the engine. But he said, "Don't get off the tracks, where the business is." And so she gets up and goes out to the door. Our coach connected to the rest of the train. And I got up and I followed her, and it was a long step down. So I said, "Excuse me, I'll go down." So I go down, and then she comes down. I'm holding her so she doesn't fall. And I get down on the rocks. She looks at me, and I'm still holding her. I look at her, and I said, "Well, that wasn't too bad." And she said, "Are you alone?" And I said, "Yes." And she kissed me. Ooh. I said, "I thought that was your dad." Well, she said, "I don't know who he is." So we just came and sat. We had a drink together. She says, "I don't want to go back and sit with him." So she stuck with me the rest of the way on that train, and she was going to Detroit. And so on the same train I'd be going to whatever that town is in Ohio. It's the last one before you go to Indiana, and it's the last one before you go into Michigan. But at any rate, I didn't get to Stockton. Leave. I wound up at the best hotel in downtown Detroit. That's where she was at any rate. So I get done with that. I'm going to spend a couple of days with my parents. And so I have to get back. So I went back, and that's how I wound up back in Europe again with that business. And that was quite interesting. I traveled all through. Well, they divided Germany into four areas, and so and we were in all of them at one time or another. Well, I don't remember Northeast Germany, Northwest, Southwest, and Southeast. we didn't go into the to the Russian northeastern area. So I spent a year, yeah, close to 2 years back there. We finished our job, uh, and I wound up as the head of personnel. I had a full colonel and a lieutenant colonel who ran our team, so to speak. There were teams to the north, 10 or 12 of us were mixed up, but changes, some of them we never saw again. Like the one that I was in was probably the best one to be in, but we were in, yeah, here we go with the names of towns again. I can't think. What's the big French town going into Germany? Starbuck? No, Starbuck. It's the biggest town in southeastern Germany.
Stuttgart?
Stuttgart.
Stuttgart, yeah.
And then there's another, wait a minute, Stuttgart? That's in southeastern Germany, but it was in the American business. Our first job was the southern occupied of Germany, very small on the southern side along the Swiss border, and we were working pretty much in some of that area that I was telling you about before, during the war, because it was close to the Hollis River, connected to the main river that comes out of Switzerland, Rhine.
The Rhine, yeah.
There was another river which came from the east into the Rhine, and that was all in the French occupied area, and Stuttgart was on the American side of the line between the French and the American, where they were, the areas that they were responsible for. Because they used to get the beer out of Stuttgart. Well, like I said, I became I was a captain. I became the headquarters commandant. I worked straight from the colonel and lieutenant colonel. Or was he a major? I think he was a major yet. Who captained our team, so to speak. And we had enlisted personnel, mostly non-cons, from corporal up. So I had, we had, I don't know how many men, over 100. We'd break up into teams and we had trucks and so forth. And we usually had, like in the French zone, we had several Frenchmen who spoke English to help us out and so on. But my job was to make sure that our people had places to stay, and vehicles. I was sort of like the headquarters commandant, and wasn't quite first names of the colonel. He was from a wealthy family in New England, someplace. I can't think of the name. He was well known and a good fighter. He made for the business there. He, it, it was up to me to make sure that the men were settled in wherever we were, and the vehicles and everything that was available for our usage and so on. And like I say, when we started out, we were in eastern France, and that was no big problem. We still had the Germans in camps. Well, the 600 in the ones in the American side, and then there was another group that were they were out of what's the eastern town like to east of Switzerland and part of it was in the States and the rest was was English, and then the Russians then were on the eastern side of the river, and that was off limits to the Americans, so to speak. But in the town, what the hell is New England? No, it's the last big town of that area.
Nuremberg? What was it in Germany?
Well, Nuremberg was north. This was south. It was south of the main river that runs through the southeastern countries from this country. It's east of.
Was it Munich? Was it Munich?
Munich. That was still in the States. The States, Munich, but it was right beyond Munich. It became the Russians, and the Russians surrounded this area. The English were south of us, and we were between the English and the river.
Was that river called the Elbe River?
The what?
The Elbe River?
You know?
That's where the Americans and Russians met up later on.
Yeah. This was 90. It was oh, damn it. Germany had been divided into 4 areas. They built walls in one area. And they had the southern Czechoslovakia and so on. Because when we were still with the working with the we didn't actually work in Switzerland, but we had access to it on the road. And then when you mentioned Munich, that was the American, and we went around Munich, looked down the main highway to this town that I can't think of the name of, but the Russians were about 10 to 15 miles east of this town I'm trying to think of. And when we were doing the prints and when we were working that area, uh, I had to take the reports in by Friday, late Friday, in the before too dark. And so the colonel would give me the okay, and I'd take the Jeep, and I went armed. With a 45. And,
With the sorry to cut you off, but did you are you referring to the Colt 45 that you carried?
well, it was similar. It was yeah.
Okay.
It was what they. It was a regular. Oh, I guess there's a cloud there.
Oh yeah, it's cloudy.
But uh, but at any rate, the I had to after I leave my place, I only had to go a couple of miles, and well, it was more than a couple of miles, probably close to. I don't know, damn it, it was only about 4 or 5 miles, 4 miles from where we were to where the Russian line was. Because because I had to stop there, and the Russians could check me out, and make sure. And this is every Friday I have to do this, and go into this town then, where all four of the countries, France, American, English, whatever it is, whatever the hell is the name of that word? It had a short name. But at any rate, I get it in to the main office because it was a collective headquarters. I mean, the English, everybody was like everybody, and so I would take this in to the office, and it was sort of wasn't really a reception room per se, but there were a couple of gals there that ran the switchboard, and they also had certain. When I turned my policies in, I had to make sure that they signed it so that I can take it back and say it's been delivered. And this one gal, she spoke 5 different languages. I couldn't believe her. And like I say, at 5 o'clock, things sort of closed down on a Friday. See, this was Friday afternoon. They like I say, she spoke 5 or 6 languages. It was terrific what she could do. And she said in this case, there were 3 girls behind the counter. And she apparently was the leader because she when I turned it in, she looked it over and gave it to the girl beside her and rechecked this, so on. And she says, "Where are you staying?" And I said, "Well, I'll be in the officer." They had one of these long building things, but with private rooms and so on. it was reserved for anyone, a little bit of officers or whoever came in, or at least through the week. The weekends weren't too bad. They were partly empty. But this guy, well, she said, I'll take you there. And so she got taken care of. And she got me. I had my jeep. So she said, no, you take this road here. And I took that road and went a couple of blocks. And she says, turn right here. Turn right, and went about a half a block, maybe a little further. And here was this officer's building, or whatever you want to call it. And she said, it's here. And she went with me to the desk and helped me sign in and so forth. And she knew what room I was getting. And so she takes me down to the room. We open it up and so on. She said, what are you going to do this evening? And I said, I don't know. I've never been here before. I said, I'll be coming in on Fridays. So, well, she said, we'll take care of that. She says, I have my vehicle is to be parked out here. So she took me out that evening. I won't go into the rest of it. But it worked out. And every Friday I would come and go back on Sunday afternoon. So I get back. Carl asked me what else to do. I said, well, I'll have to do this. I said, the Russians stopped me today. One of the times, about the second time, I think, third time, I checked out, and I'm in Russian country now, but the country owned this guy. There's a couple of guys at there's a gate that goes up and down. The guy fires his damn gun over my head from the rear. And I turn around and look, and they're having the best time of their lives. They saw me jump and saw me turn. And they didn't do that anymore, but they did it the one time. And another time, I had to cover about 10 miles of Russian land that they spoke of. And I got down into the area, and a couple of these damn Russian men, armed, stopped me on the road and indicated with their hand to give them something. And I just happened to have a couple of pieces of chocolate in the dashboard of the Jeep. So, because I even had a cover on the Jeep if I needed it. But here's this guy. He's armed. He's got a long rifle and so on. And he didn't know how to speak English, but he knew words. And he wanted a bar or something. And so I gave him one, and he smiled. And then he got in the Jeep with me. And he waved, go. Then he got off when we got to the edge of the town, the main town. And so, well, he had to get off because it was the neutral area. So, but that was the highlights of my trip back there. When we finished there, we had finished pretty much the areas that we were covering. And it was sad in some respects, and sometimes it wasn't too nice. But we found all sorts of people. And then our headquarters was in France, not in Germany, not in American buildings. It was right next to, what's the big castle in France? It's got the big gardens and so forth. It was neutral during the war.
Was this near the French Riviera?
Well, this was close to it. It was a two or three-story building, and it was next to this castle that stretched all the way and had the beautiful gardens down yonder and so forth. I had been there once before when I was in the Boy Scouts. It would take you through what the hell do you call them? I can't. Oh, at any rate, they were. My colonel left. Our unit broke down after we got done out in Regimental. Watch me, that's because where the river runs divides Czechoslovakia from eastern. Well,
The Rhine?
which?
The Rhine?
Well, no, the Rhine ran north and south. There was there was